We're live. Hey everybody, welcome to my live practice session. I'm practicing major sevenths in the diminished scale. So I'm playing over like an E7 sharp 9. I'm doing it with hybrid picking though, because it's hard to play any other way. Hybrid picking is when you pick with your other fingers other than your pick on the right hand. I use it for any type of interval jumps like that, because it's really hard to alternate. That's okay, but if I go, look at all the extra motion. Takes a lot of energy compared to this. Now I started getting into this years and years ago. I realized that when I started practicing sixths and scales, that I could play it alternate picking, but there's only so fast you can go when you're alternate picking like that. So. And then you can start getting this kind of sound when you play it really fast. If you can hold the notes down, play really legato. You start getting these this almost sounds contrapuntal. And so I would practice even patterns if I did. I would practice things like, just to try and get that try and get that middle finger as even as the pick. It's hard to do. You really have to have the right length nail to do it. I just have a little bit of a nail on that middle finger, but anytime that you're playing any wide intervals where you're skipping a string, this comes in handy. Like, if you watch, I'm going. I'm actually doing alternate picking too. It really saves a lot of energy in the left hand. It's kind of like when people use sweep picking. The reason to use sweep picking is because it saves energy. If I were to play this G minor arpeggio and I were to play as opposed to all downstroke, that's about as fast as I can play it alternate picking. It's really hard to do clean with a clean sound. It's easy to sweep pick with distortion, but to sweep pick without distortion is tricky. But that saves a lot of energy in your right hand, where you're not, because when you're moving down and you're trying to upstroke, it's actually going against gravity. So that is why alternate or sweep picking is actually really efficient. And the same thing with hybrid picking. So if I'm going to do any type of a lot of arpeggio, if I'm, I mean, I can alternate pick that, and it just really helps, I think, to be fluid, to be able to go back and forth if you're hybrid picking anything, because especially any type of wide interval jumps. If I'm playing over a B minor 7 chord, as was, you can hear the difference in there. You see that finger just really, and if I'm doing, see, I'm altering the loudness of that middle finger. So what I'm doing here, let's say I got a G major chord. So I'm doing the scale, pedaling off the fifth. So if I have, let's say I got a chord like, so if I want to play it, I'm playing over like an A Dorian scale, but this works because it's, so I'm going, then I'm doing the scale in thirds. So hybrid picking will really work. It'll work on any type of arpeggios, anytime you have any type of string skipping, and you can use it on adjacent strings as well. When you're doing fourth intervals, I find if I'm doing diminished, when I was doing that pattern there, that would work. I find that that's easier than going. I can do it. What's tricky is that you have two different things that are going on simultaneously that are hard when you're playing a diminished scale in fourths, because you have all these bars. You can not bar it, but if you bar it, there's a lot of left hand. It makes the left hand really tense, so it makes the line sound. So, but if you can, I think it makes the line sound stiff. But if you can somehow those kind of jumps like that, you can actually put some dynamics in the lines, and you're not struggling, you're not fighting. So right there, I'm not doing where you're just kind of powering through it. You can actually have a little bit more finesse in what you're playing there. So anyways, what I used to do practicing hybrid picking too is I would play picking patterns. So if you're doing like, so I would use actually multiple fingers and play patterns. So I'm doing this pattern that I do. That you do like that, or do it. That's a really good way to practice it, is to take some kind of standard finger picking patterns and hybrid pick with it. So you're actually not using your index finger because it's holding the pick, but you're using these two fingers then to play the chord form. There's a Villa-Lobos etude number 1. Any of you that play classical guitar would know this etude. So I used to hybrid pick the etude like that. You take a bar chord and you go in. You should check it out, Villa-Lobos etude number 1. It's basically a series of held chords. It starts on E minor, and it's got a bunch of different chords that you go through. and you just play the same pattern all the way through until the very end. I think there's one run at the end, but this is the pattern. You know, people talk about Lenny Breau, who was a great guitar player. And Lenny Breau used to do a similar kind of thing with harmonics, where he would play. I actually can't do it because I don't have a thumbnail right now, but he would play harmonics in the same way, where he would hold the pick like this and then pick with his ring finger and play 12 frets above wherever the harmonic was. I can't really do it on this guitar because the action is so low on it, but this really comes in handy to be able to do that. So, any questions?
Yeah.
Let's hear it, Aaron. Aaron's moderating for me.
How do you develop your sense of melodies? I find it difficult to implement a practice routine that practically improves my ability to improvise melodies.
Well, to play melodies, you have to be able to play. You have to know where you're going to go and what it's going to sound like before you play it. That's kind of the first part of it. And you've got to play the right notes in the right spots. You'll hear people talk about avoid notes in jazz. This is kind of was the typical way of the typical pedagogy when I was in school. Now, I've never took a jazz improv class, but everyone I know that takes jazz improv, whether they're at Berkeley or anywhere, they teach these things called avoid notes. And avoid notes are basically, if you're on a 2-chord, a minor 2-chord, that you avoid the sixth of the scale. So it'd be, I'm going to avoid the sixth. So I just made up a scale. I took an A Dorian scale and I left out the 6th degree in both octaves. And one of the reasons is because if you go to the 5-chord after, that note that you left out becomes the 3rd of the next chord. Well, that really becomes important in melody playing to understand this stuff. Now, I don't believe in avoid notes. I believe in knowing why you're playing notes. And if you play the 13th, you need to play it with confidence and to know that you're playing it. And then you have to go somewhere different, because once you've given away the sound of the next chord, you have to use a different tension. So if I'm playing in A minor 7-chord and I'm using the 13, then on the 5-chord, then I'm going to use like a sharp 9 sound, because I've already given away that note. So I'm going to, so I did. So right there is a motif talking about melody playing. So what did I do? I played. So I'm using this 13th. I'm going, and then I'm going on the D7. I'm playing a sharp 9 with a flat 5. So I'm going on the A minor. Then the D. I'm going. And then on the G major. My motif is da 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 da, right? So I'm going da, 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 da. And then I do the same thing, but with a different set of notes. And I've moved from that to that. And really, logically, I should probably go there on the G major, but that has a 6th in it, so I'd have to probably play a different set of, to make it more of like a Lydian sound. So my motif, playing a melodic idea, would be, so that is a melodic idea, or if I play a melodic pattern like this, and I'll do things like this to demonstrate it. Simple. A motif can be anything, but melodic ideas are rhythmic ideas. If you play all 8th notes, there is no motivic development. melodies have rhythms to them. So what you need to do is you need to develop rhythmic ideas, and play the correct notes that follow those rhythmic ideas. If I'm going to play, if I have an A7 flat 9 chord, and I'm going to resolve to D minor, so I've got, and then that note, that entire line is leading up to that F, but I delay the resolution. So is really the end of that phrase, but you could even delay it. So that's how you develop melody ideas, is you have to develop rhythmic ideas. And I'll tell you a great record to listen to. I'll tell you a great song to listen to if you're a guitar player or a sax player or any kind of player. There's a Wes Montgomery record called Full House. And there's a blues on there called Blue and Boogie. And Johnny Griffin is the sax player on it. And he plays, Wes plays a phenomenal guitar solo on it. But Johnny Griffin plays a motif. Every single chorus is a new motif. And I think it's one of the greatest examples, other than, Metheny, Wes Montgomery, Cannonball Adderley, and Johnny Griffin are uniquely good at developing melodic ideas, ones that lead to one another. I have a video called Multiplying Melodic Motifs, something like that I did, oh boy, probably 9 months ago. That's one of my favorite videos, and it talks about this, about developing melodic ideas, and it kind of uses Pat Metheny and Wes, and I use examples off records of how people develop their ideas from chorus to chorus. And you need to play ideas that suggest other ideas. If I'm playing over a blues, I've got a blues in my Beato book. There's a sample blues that's like, so it starts out like that over a C blues, and it goes, so right there you can hear da 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 da. It goes to the 4 chord. You can hear those chord changes moving there. The melodic lines have direction to them, So it's kind of going. That's the first part of it. Da ba da ba da ba da ba da ba da da da. So da 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 ba da 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 da. Now, if you play it as all eighth notes, if I take away some of the notes, like if I go take away some of the notes. I basically put the notes in the same spot and just remove some and try to create a more of a motif out of it. So that's kind of the goal in practicing, is to find melodic direction and find rhythmic motifs that you can develop. I hope that answers your question.
Can you explain octatonic scales and maybe get into their use in film music?
Okay, octatonic scales are symmetrical 8-note scales. We call them the diminished scale. And we use them a lot in jazz. Jazz players are very familiar with the octatonic scale. They use it on dominant chords. They use them in the half whole manner. So if I've got E7, or if I have If I have an F diminished 7, same scale, but on the diminished chord you play whole half, on the dominant chord you play half whole. So you start on the root and it'd be. The reason it's symmetrical is because it alternates half steps and whole steps. Whether it starts with a half step or a whole step, it doesn't matter. Now, people call it the octatonic scale because oct means 8. Now, to use in film music, people use it a lot in film music because people have been using it in orchestral music forever. You start hearing it, I mean, you hear the octatonic scale or the diminished scale in Chopin. You hear it, you start hearing it in the Romantic era a lot, even though Bach would use it. Bach would use more of diminished arpeggios, but there's a, one of my favorite Bach cantatas, cantata number 54, that starts with this chord. Oh, it's beautiful. Essentially, you've got like a 5/7 over 1, and within your dominant chords, if you start going up the a dominant 7th chord, right? If I take a C7 and I go C, E, G, B flat, and I go up to that flat 9, I get a C7 flat 9, and there's a diminished triad right there starting on the 5th that gives me that flat 9, G, B flat, D flat. So you start to hear these things in classical music in Bach. Let me actually change to a piano sound here so I can demonstrate it better. You guys all know the let's see here if I got it. So that D minor, what is it? One of the inventions, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So it's going D minor, then going A7, flat 9, and then resolves back to D minor. So Bach was hearing that as going D minor, then he's hearing, which would be to C sharp diminished 7 over A, which gives you an A7 flat 9 back to D minor. When you start getting into Chopin, you start getting into, and Liszt and composers like that, you start getting into real full-on use of the diminished, of the diminished or octatonic scale. They would use it still with arpeggios and things like that, and using the using particular patterns. It's not until you get into the 20th century that you start getting. If I'm playing an F octatonic scale, I would have a voicing like that. What that is, I've got the entire scale laid out in a chord. On the bottom half, I have an F diminished 7, F, A flat, C flat, E double flat, which is really A, F, A flat, B, D. And on the top half, I have all the upper extensions. G, which is the major 9, B flat is the 11th, C sharp is the flat 13, and E is the major 7. So if you hear a chord, if I just had the E up here, or if I just play it like that in the voicing, so F, A flat, B, E, I'd call that an F diminished major 7. These sound really great in modern film score music, or in modern, you hear Schoenberg use the scale a lot. You hear a lot of, Stravinsky would use scales like this a lot. And this particular voicing is a little bit more modern. You wouldn't necessarily hear the entire scale laid out. That's something Aiden Essen would do, but that he would do 35 years ago, actually. I don't know if he would do that now. But you also then have these polychords that come out of it that are really effective when they're used rhythmically. So if I have a, let's say I have an E major chord and I put an F in the bass here, okay? So this would be from that F tonic diminished scale. That same scale that gives me this chord. Okay? In the scale, I have E, G sharp, B, and F. But if I voice it like this, then I have a real polychord like that, a real bitonal chord, I would call it. Now, if I put a C in the chord and ground it even more, this is really not quite out of the diminished scale because that C note is not in the diminished scale, but it gives it more power. It gives it something that you can really develop rhythmic ideas with. That's what these polychords are great with in writing, is that they can use, you can you can do, kind of extended passages with them. If I were to play, so that's using a bunch of different bitonal chords. I did like C Phrygian to E flat over B to G 13 flat 9 or E major over G to forget what it is, F Phrygian to E flat Lydian augmented here, which is G major over E flat. I think that's what I did. Then I resolved. I did to that tonic diminished sound there. Really powerful. And you'll hear chords like that. You hear John Williams use chords like that. It's really effective when they're orchestrated in with the full orchestra with the brass section. You'll hear it in spots like in the Star Wars theme. There's a couple spots. There's a little piccolo section in the middle of the main theme where everything breaks down, and there's a couple polychords that they use that he uses in there with these kind of devices. But this octatonic scale is very useful unless it's used in a really boring way where you're just running up and down the scale. What you have to do is you have to find those unique sounds that are within it and develop those. And don't be afraid to add notes to the scale. If I take this chord, this E major over F, which really comes from the scale, the whole half. Sorry, it's distorted, but F, G, A flat, B, C sharp, D, E. That's the scale, and here's the chord. And then I add the C to it. Then I might add F sharp to it. F sharp's not in the scale, but it sounds cool. But within that scale are other notes like there's all these Lydian triads. There's 4 major triads. There's 4 minor triads. There's 4 dominant 7th chords. There's 4 minor 7th chords. There's 4 diminished 7th chords. There's 4 Lydian triads in it. So there's a lot of different possibilities, and I've got 3 videos that talk about the diminished scale. One of them's called "What Everyone Needs to Know About the Diminished Scale," and the diminished scale is the octatonic scale. So if you look for those videos, I have a lot of examples of how to use it in a more contemporary classical way, for modern film scoring and things, without your typical. I hear people use it that don't know what they're doing with it, and they write things that sound really lame, essentially. That very pedestrian. Jazz players are actually usually better at knowing how to use these chords, but your facility with knowing what is in there. If I'm in F diminished or F whole half diminished scale, I have to know what the different triads are in there, right? So the first one is E major, is one of them. It's built off the major 7th. And then if I just go up minor thirds, if I go up to G, I go up a minor third to B flat, I go up another minor third. So if you just go up minor thirds to D flat, you start to get so you get E, minor third up G, minor third up B flat, and watch the video. It's got all the stuff in there that you'll need to know. I have a nice, great chart on it where I show all the different possibilities on that from that scale. Aaron?
Great. Next question. Do you think it makes sense to practice technique while watching a YouTube video, or do you only make progress if you devote all your attention to the practice?
Depends on what you're practicing. It's a very good question. I don't know. I usually, if I'm watching a YouTube video, I would usually stop it when I'm practicing it. If you're trying to learn the things from it, you're going to stop it and try and play it. I mean, I've watched YouTube videos to do things for some of the videos I've done. For example, I transcribed Mike Brecker lines. I've transcribed Brad Meldau lines. Kenny Barron lines, where I transcribed the lick that he played, that he goes, and he plays an E add 9 arpeggio over F on an F blues. He's playing Billy's Bounce. He's doing a duet with Brad Meldau. And if I'm watching it, I'll stop the thing when he plays it and I'll work it out what he's playing. So I wouldn't necessarily practice mindless things and watch a video. I wouldn't just noodle around. You need to be focused on what you're practicing.
All right. We got a question here regarding the play what you hear approach in improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that practicing only that will make you a great improviser?
No, because if you don't hear anything good, then playing what you hear will come out bad. So there has to be an innate sense of what is good. And I think that melodies that are good have balance to them. And whether they're pop melodies, whether they're jazz melodies, they can be complex melodies like Donna Lee by Charlie Parker. They can be, really kind of simple melodies that are riff-based, that are motific, like Olio by Sonny Rollins. What is it? That's a rhythm changes. It's like, and that's a great motific melody. Now, I wouldn't say that is that super melodic. Well, it is to me, but that's more of a rhythmic motive or a riff motif. So there's a lot of different kinds of melodies. So it's hard to say. If you practice what you're hearing all the time, like I said, if you're hearing stuff that isn't melodic and you're executing it, that's not necessarily going to make your playing sound any better. So it's really developing taste is the key to everything. So to know what a great melody is and then be able to execute it. So that's why transcribing is so important. You got to transcribe solos by the best players. And once you learn those, it teaches you, how to, what a good melody sounds like and how to balance it and how to play it. But you have to, it's tough to develop ideas and develop melodic ideas and play what you hear. But playing what you hear is not hard, as long as you know your intervals. You don't have to have perfect pitch. You have to have great relative pitch to be able to plunk out melodies. But you have to have taste before anything. That's my answer to that.
Nice. So Joe Hernandez is asking...
Hey, Joe.
Can you demonstrate some jazz comping strategies, since a lot of players don't own that skill?
Comping strategies. Well, a lot of times for comping, it depends on what if you're playing with a group. Joe, I know you play with a group. A lot of times, if I'm playing with a piano player, also, it's going to dictate what I'm going to play and how many note voicings I'm going to play. If I'm playing over tune, let's say I'm playing over tune like All Things You Are. I use that tune a lot because most people know it, because it's one of the most common standards. But first chord's F minor 7. So So I'm going to play probably, I might only play 3 notes. And then on the B minor 7, I might only play 3 notes. And I might only play on these inner strings, right? Can you turn off that delay there?
Yeah.
So I'm just playing little chord stabs. Depends on what your soloist is playing. So I'm using a lot of fragments. I'm using just the upper parts of drop 2 chords or drop 2 and 3 chords. F minor 7, I might play this, right? Only these 3 notes. These 3 notes. B minor 7, B flat minor 7, I might play. And do a little line cliche down to E flat 7. Something to resolve to E flat 7, and I might go. And I'm playing E flat 9 to E flat 7 flat 9 to the C minor triad, which is really the top part of an A flat major 7 chord. So and then I'm going. Then I might play just the top part of a D flat major chord, or I might maybe play D flat 6 9, and then. Okay, so there I did. When it goes to C minor to F minor, I went. So C minor, I did. F minor, B flat 7, and then E flat major. I'm up here to so. Then there's my A flat major 7, and then I do the 2 5 and G, and but I'm just playing little chord fragments there. So those are the kind of things you want to do. You can also do things where you're just playing 2 notes too, Joe. So on F minor, I might just play the 3rd and the 7th. And then B flat, I might play the 3rd and 7th, or the root and the 3rd, the root and 3rd. And I'm playing a lot of 3rds and 7th. D minor 7, G 7, C major 7. I'm playing the 3rd and 7th on D minor, 3rd and 7th on G 7, 3rd and 7th on C major 7. Then leading nicely back to my 3rd and 7th on the C minor, and so on and so forth. Playing little 2-note fragments. They could be 2 notes here on these 6 string. It doesn't matter. Like I said, it depends on whether you're playing with a keyboard player. If you're playing with a keyboard player, you need to listen to what they're doing. If they're playing a lot of roots and they're playing and kind of ignoring the bass player, then I'll really avoid roots. If you are playing if you're just playing guitar and there's no keyboardist, then you can start putting some roots in the chords, and I might play. I probably play some roots in there too to fill it out a little bit, because even if I'm playing those notes, those bass notes are probably going to be an octave above what the bass player's playing, so they're not going to really interfere with them. And the nice thing about the bass notes is that you can get some good dissonances. If I'm on the B flat minor 7 and I go to E flat 7 flat 9, right here I'm playing a C major over E flat, which is a nice. And I could go, or I could go. So I've got some, it's just a lot of it's about the rhythmic things that you're doing. You want to really try and develop rhythms that complement what the soloist is doing at the time. A lot of times on gigs, I would try and sometimes I would, if the soloist wasn't playing anything interesting, I would try and create rhythmic motifs in my comping that would signal, hey man, follow this rhythm because it's gonna, people are gonna be psyched by hearing it. And so you'll, in your comping, and then they're playing and they start mimicking what you're doing and it makes them sound better. So a lot of times you can comp and actually improve what the soloist is doing. Another thing to do too is, depending on how good your ear is, when I'm here a soloist, if somebody's going to play, if I'm playing a B flat minor 7 chord and the soloist is playing the ninth, I'll go to, that sounds better than, I'm playing with a fifth in the chord here, which gives you that interval at the top, or if you play with a minor 11th, gives you this interval which is stronger. So if the guy's going, I'm going to play that minor 11th sound because I know it's going to sound great. I'll leave it out of the voicing and I won't play way stronger without the fifth in it. So I'm always listening for what the soloist is doing at the time, saying, oh, he's playing the 13th there, so I'm going to play this voicing. Or he's playing, if he's playing the 13th on a major 7th chord, or if he's playing let's say he's playing a sharp 5 or something cool. I might play the G major 13 to create that dissonance. Or if they're playing the sharp 11, I might play, if it's like da. If you put it in the chord, da, it's nice to play that 13th because it harmonizes with that sharp 11. Da, it's better than da. When I put it in my voicing, I've taken away the power of that note. So always be listening for what they're playing and try not to double the melody note, especially if they're on a really good tension note. Because try and play a chord voicing that's in thirds with that note, where your top note of your melody or of your chord is in thirds with it. So that's a great lesson actually right there. If that's the only thing you picked up from this whole thing right now, that was actually extremely important. So rewind it and watch that again. I don't mean you, Joe. I know you can. I know you got this, but that actually is extremely helpful. What you play behind the soloist can make their solo go from mundane to sounding great. And if they play a tension note, don't play it in your voicing. One thing that bugs me about playing with piano players, being a guitar player, is when they play every note of the chord, Aaron, in the chord voicing, and it gives you nothing to play because nothing sounds good under it. I'd rather have the guy play some voicing that has a half step away that I can play that's going to lead my ear to a note that's going to sound good against the chord. If I'm singing the third of a major chord in a song, let's say, if I sing F sharp on a D major chord and I put it in the chord, you've got 2/3, but if I leave it out of the chord, the voice being a different character than the guitar actually makes that third jump out and be more powerful. And in natural voice leading, if you take Theory 1 and you learn basic 4-part writing, you don't double the third on major chords. You really don't double it on minor chords that very often either. It depends on your voice leading, but you do not want to double the third because it weakens the quality of the chord. Yes, Aaron?
We have a few more really good questions here.
Great.
You feeling good?
Yeah.
All right. We were just talking about this earlier, but how do you approach outside playing? Are there any techniques you can think of?
There's a few different ways. Outside playing can be where you do certain types of patterns that that follow chord progressions or that don't follow chord progressions. Now, you'll hear people like Alan Holdsworth might take a pattern. You can turn my delay on so it'll. My sound is so thin here because I have no distortion. So I took a pattern here that's kind of would be more of an outside. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. So I'm doing I just did a pattern. Now that would be more of pattern playing or something. Alan will do stuff like that. That you could use as an outside line. But things, you could do things that are chord based, right? More like Pat Metheny does. If I'm doing like a pattern like that is actually based up. So I'm doing like a so I've got this B major. Then I use an F sharp augmented. Then a double chromatic enclosure. Then I use E major there. So that would be a something that's a little bit more tonality based. Something like that would actually have a chord progression that you're playing. You could use the Coltrane changes over if you got a B7 chord. Over a progression. I mean, it really depends. But there's outside playing that is over changes, and then there's outside playing that on guitar that a lot of people do that are just based on patterns. You'll hear Pat Metheny play those, You'll hear him play patterns like that are kind of interesting rhythmically. Now, some of these things you can do and base them off chords. So D7 flat 9. Now that would be like over diminished. I have D7 flat 9 and I'm playing. Or you can play and do, and where I'm kind of doing, or things like that. You hear Pat play stuff like that all the time. I used to hear him play like that. I don't know if he plays like that anymore. When I heard him recently, it was actually hard to hear what he was playing because his guitar had a lot of top end on it, didn't have much mid range, so it was really hard to distinguish what he was playing. But those kind of patterns like that, those kind of outside patterns are they can, as long as they intersect with a chord somewhere, you can play them as long as you want. So there's a few different approaches. I mean, Alan Holdsworth will use certain scales to interconnect, like he'll use a scale that will connect two different scales. It's interesting, if you watch the Steve Hunt video that I did, the Sounding Off with him, we played with Alan for 10 years, he talks about that, about Alan, how Alan thinks of scales, or thought of scales. And he would have scales that would connect ideas, and some of them would sound very out because they'd be outside the chord changes, but they would he would use them in that particular way, to connect, two different sections or something, and have this outside area that he would play in for a second until he kind of met up with the next chord change or something. So it's kind of hard to say. I'm going to make some more videos on outside playing, and give some more concrete examples. I did a thing with where I transcribed a Mike Brecker thing and John Schofield. I think it's called Brecker Schofield something. I mean, it's one of the 300 videos I have, but where I talked about outside playing. And there's chromatic sidestepping, which is when you're playing, let's say you're playing a pentatonic, and I'm playing over a B minor. And you do just move up a half step or down half step. So I'm doing, I'm sidestepping it. So simple, right? I'm going down a half step. So there, and I went up a half step. Now I went up and down. So B minor, pentatonic, C, B minor, B flat minor. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have patterns that change in a predictable spot. So I did. So I'm using patterns like fives and things, odd groupings, so it's not too obvious where you're going outside. It sounds more natural, more fluid.
Do you have the Lydian etude on there?
I don't know if I do.
Okay.
I don't know where it is.
Somebody was asking about a Lydian etude.
Do I have a Lydian etude? I don't know. I don't remember. Do I have a Lydian etude? I must have a Lydian. I have a Lydian video. I know that.
Yeah.
It probably has a Lydian etude in it. I know I do.
What are 5 recordings, if you could name them, that influenced you the most?
Oh boy.
Or a few?
A couple of them are on my channel. There's an Iden Essen string piece improvisation from 1987 that I posted a couple months ago that's on there. There's another piece that I don't know if it is posted on there, that's another improv of Iden's. It's called Improv 3. A lot of Iden's music, almost everything that I know has influenced me dramatically. And Keith Jarrett, I was playing Aaron this thing from Keith Jarrett, the Bremen Lausanne concert from 1975 or 73. When was that? Do you remember? Aaron? From the mid-70s. Yeah. It's a solo piano concert, and there's this, the longest piece on there is an hour and 4 minutes. And right around 32 or 33 minutes, he's picking inside the piano, and then he plays one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. And if you don't listen to the whole hour-long piece, or if you don't listen to the first 30 minutes, you'll never find this thing. And that's incredibly beautiful to me. There's a lot of guitar recordings. The whole Boss Guitar by Wes Montgomery. Moments or Blue Train by Coltrane. People say Giant Steps. Blue Train is one of the greatest records ever. The group that he had on there is just amazing, and the songwriting is incredible on that. I love Miles. Relaxin' is one of my favorite records ever. It's hard to, and then there's rock records that influenced me, like Zeppelin 1 and Exile on Main Street and Revolver by the Beatles. Those are massively influential in my musical development. So it really depends. Joe Pass Virtuoso. Oh man, if I didn't have that record, I wouldn't be playing jazz. If my dad didn't buy that for me in 10th grade, I never would have played jazz. So that was massively important. And but I've listened to so much different music that to pick 5 things is very hard. But listen to some of the Aiden music that's on my channel here, and I'm going to post some more. But those are massively influential because they're just so far. It's just things that he did even 30 years ago are so rich with information that you could use, to take a lifetime just to go through one piece even. Those are all great records that I said. Keith Jarrett Spirits, Keith Jarrett Birth, that record. Parallels. Not just the Standards Volume 1. There's a thing called Spirits 20. It's on the Spirits record, but listen to Spirits 20. Keith Jarrett is playing all the instruments on it, and he plays soprano sax, and he's a phenomenal soprano sax player. I don't know if you guys know that, but he made this record, and he's playing piano, and it's absolutely beautiful, and the note choices that he has are just incredible. So remember, Spirits 20. And there are many Pat Metheny things. Like I said, Wes, too numerous to mention. I couldn't pinpoint enough things. How's that?
Great.
Anything else?
Yeah. Do you have an opinion on why Chopin sounds so unique? If he's using any special scales or...
Chopin was really expanded the instrument and harmonically, and he was a really important composer. I have a very good friend that I want to have on a sounding off who's actually an expert in Chopin. And I want to bring him on to talk about this exact thing because Chopin was very important, not only musically, but there's a lot of technical innovations that happened with Chopin that went into Liszt and the great pianists. He and I talk about this a lot, that the piano is one of the few. You'll turn on YouTube anytime and you'll see people playing with 2 hands, doing all this crazy stuff on guitar, all these new techniques developed all the time. But you never really see any new piano techniques developed because piano pedagogy has been mastered over hundreds of years. And there's people that were technical geniuses, 150 years ago, like Liszt and Beethoven and Mozart and Bach. So the keyboard is one of the few instruments that's had this rich pedagogy attached to it because of things like the Chopin etudes. For those of you that don't know, there were 2 sets of etudes. There was Opus 10 and Opus 25, and then there were 3 other pieces that were not connected to either one of those. But they were very important pieces. They were study pieces, but they also, because they were study pieces because they developed certain techniques, but they're really important in the development of piano technique and pedagogy, as well as being really musical works. And if you don't know those sets of etudes, you should really check them out because it's Opus 10 and Opus 25. They're some of them you might have heard. I know whoever's asking this question probably knows these works, but they're really important and everybody should experience them.
We can do a few just really short
Okay,
questions.
real quick ones. Then.
Yeah. Can you get Aiden on again?
Yes.
Great. What are your thoughts on Steely Dan?
I like early Steely Dan better than later Steely Dan. I know that's kind of sacrilegious, but I like, what is it? I like that. What is that, Josie? But I typically I love Can't Buy a Thrill, which is their first record. That has incredible songs like Dirty Work, like not only Reelin' in the Years, which is on there too, and Do It Again is on there, but there are some B-sides that are absolutely phenomenal. Katie Lied is a great record. Royal Scam is a phenomenal record. These are records that came about before Pretzel Logic. I mean, these records came about before they got into their kind of jazz thing with their sharp 9 chords and their major chords. Those kind of voicings like that. To me, that stuff, being a jazz, when that happened, you know, Asia came out in 1980 or so in Gaucho, and I didn't really, there's some great stuff on there. But I don't find the writing as melodic as some of the earlier music. So I was a huge Steely Dan fan, but like I said, of the earlier records more than the later records.
Great.
So there we go. I hope I answered some questions that you guys have, and like to remind you to go to my website, which has been going through some makeovers, and we relaunched it a couple weeks ago, and I had never updated it in 4 years, but I have now, so I invite you to go there. I have a master class coming up on the July 29th here in Atlanta for those of you that want to make the trip. It's an 8-hour master class. And love to meet some of you in person. So the information's on my website as well. Thanks everybody for watching. I'm Rick Beato.